Welcome back, everyone. Next up, we have Avalon Advanced Materials Inc. It trades on the OTCQB under the symbol AVLNF and on the TSX under the symbol AVL. It's a Canadian mineral development company specializing in sustainably produced materials for clean technology. The company now has 4 advanced stage projects providing investors with exposure to lithium, tin, and indium, as well as rare earth elements, tantalum, cesium, and zirconium. I hope I pronounced those correctly. Please welcome as President and CEO, Don Bubar. Welcome, Don.
Well, thank you. Good to be back and provide everybody with an update on how things are progressing here.
Great. We look forward to your update as well with your new LOI. And the floor is yours. Take it away, sir.
Okay. Well, our focus is still on our lithium project for obvious reasons. There's so much interest in creating these new lithium battery material supply chains that now the opportunity is knocking for us to finally get this project into production and start producing lithium battery materials and get this whole supply chain started here in Canada and probably to serve markets internationally, including in the US. So today I thought I would give you an update on where we're at with that, plus give you some updates on some of the other projects that we're working on as well that are also offering interesting new opportunities to diversify and produce other types of critical minerals for new technologies. Your reminder on all the forward-looking statements I'll make today. And just where we're at in terms of our corporate structure. We're doing our best these days to manage dilution, having been a publicly traded company since 1995, relying on the equity markets. We've got a lot of shares outstanding now, close to 400 million. But good news is that with the new deal we have with SAR on our lithium project, that a lot of the capital that we need to get things rolling there will be not raised in dilutive ways for our shareholders going forward here. So right now we have about 3.5 million working capital, enough to keep us moving forward in the short term here. And key message I always like to communicate to investors is that we remain very undervalued as a lithium equity, and that I think most equity investors are still not familiar with the fact that Avalon has the most advanced lithium project in Ontario, one of the most advanced in North America. And we're very close to getting that supply chain started. And once that gets out there, we should see a better valuation down the road. And as I often mention, we remain committed to applying ESG principles in our business. If you're going to produce materials for clean technology, you must do it in environmentally and socially responsible ways. And we remain committed to doing that. We've been producing an annual sustainability report for 10 years now. So I wanted to update you on the lithium project, obviously, but also give you a brief updates on some of our other assets here to let you know how those are coming along too. Our Nechalacho project, most people know us primarily as a rare earths equity. And while we've got a partner in there now doing some of the initial work on that project, it's still a very interesting opportunity to participate in the rare earth supply chain down the road here. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our East Kemptville tin indium project in this presentation as well. Another really interesting opportunity. And there's lots happening with tin that most people are not aware of that I'll be filling you in on here today. But this whole new world of critical mineral supply chains remains kind of challenging space to get started in. In a country like Canada, that's only ever really done the traditional bulk commodities in the mining business. And it's been a matter now of getting people better informed on how different this business is compared to traditional mining of exchange-traded bulk commodities. And I like to characterize it as advanced manufacturing, because while it involves taking a bit of rock out of the ground, after that, it's all about what you do to process it, to turn it into the derivative products that'll meet the needs of the market applications that are looking for that particular material. And regulations now have to adapt to this. And this is a key message I've been communicating with government here now, that we really should be looking at how these should be regulated separately from traditional commodities to recognize how different they are. And a good example is that getting the resource started is not about tons and grade as it is with a gold or copper resource. It's about defining the product and how you could make it and getting commitments on offtake in order to justify developing it. And the scale is determined by not by resource size, by the size of the market. So it's a growth business. If your product is successful, demand will grow over time. Very, very different from the traditional mining sector. And you got to take a bulk sample early on and do that test work. And there's always barriers on doing that. So I think we're starting to get there now in terms of getting government to recognize how this needs to be treated as a really different business than traditional mining. And the other thing I've been continuing to advocate on, and we'll talk a bit more about later, is how historic mine waste now must be looked at as opportunities to recover these critical minerals, because there's so many examples of mine sites developed decades ago for one traditional commodity where the resource contained lots of other stuff that had no value then, but does today. Got to look at that as an opportunity to recover them efficiently and clean up the long-term liability while you do it. And on the government side in Ontario, we've made some significant progress there when Ontario announced around the time of my earlier presentation in March on the new critical mineral strategy for the province. And these are all important points that have been communicating for a while on what it's going to take to get these supply chains started here. And they have been successfully now attracting the interest of some of the downstream end users to establish manufacturing capacity in Ontario. Stellantis, LG Energy Solutions, GM are all looking at now getting into the EV manufacturing business and battery manufacturing businesses here in Ontario. And the government recognized that in order to get those commitments, got to ensure them that they'll support creating the critical material supply chains in the province to meet their future needs. And we have them all on the ground. It's about time we started using them to support more industrial development in the southern part of the province. And the federal government now is also creating a new critical minerals strategy that will be helping them implement as well with some advice. In fact, during PDAC that was just held last week, participated in a couple of roundtables with senior cabinet ministers, and they're now very interested in getting the messaging right now to help create whatever pathways will facilitate getting these supply chains started as quickly as possible. And I always like to emphasize how this will create really good new economic development opportunities for First Nation communities that are in the north and have never participated in the economy. And these resources, especially lithium pegmatites, can be developed in very low impact, sustainable ways and create new economic development opportunities to create supply for future processing operations, and we're planning to do with our lithium operations. So that's another thing that needs to be emphasized, is that they don't have to be produced as giant open pit operations that do a lot of environmental damage. It can be done as small scale quarrying operations and produce products that can start creating an economy that can grow over time. So back to our Separation Rapids lithium project. just located north of Kenora with pretty good transportation infrastructure. And we're close to a couple of hydro dams there too. And it makes sense for us actually to take advantage of that to get access to hydropower, and that'll enable us to be able to have a net zero producing operation sometime down the road. And one of the things I learned at PDAC is there's a company now that is promoting how First Nations can look at taking ownership of hydro transmission lines that are constructed in their traditional territories. So this is a message I'm going to be delivering to the Wapsimaang Independent Nations at White Dog, that there's an opportunity here to take advantage of that hydro dam that was built in their traditional territory decades ago and facilitate hydropower for our operation and be able to make money on it while we get the clean energy for our operation. And as you may remember from my previous presentations, this is a unique example of a LCT, lithium cesium pegmatite, where the lithium occurs in two fairly rare minerals, petalite and lepidolite, especially petalite. And it is the dominant one in the resource, but lepidolite is also another lithium mica that can be recovered as a second ore mineral that also often contains some recoverable cesium. And petalite has always been and still is an specialty mineral used in high-strength glass ceramic products, and that's an area that is still open to us to serve going forward. Plus, we can probably recover some tantalum. There is tantalum in the resource, and rubidium-rich case bars, which are also an industrial mineral with demand in the marketplace now. So that's one of the interesting things about these resources. In addition to not having anything toxic in them that represents an environmental hazard, almost everything in the rock is potentially a saleable byproduct. So there won't be much waste. What's left would be just like sand and gravel that could be used for aggregate going forward there. So a good example of what we should be doing in this industry going forward is maximizing the full value of everything in the resource. Now here's our land position. The main resource that we discovered way back that was featured on the first slide there is on the red mining lease there. And we've expanded our land position over the last few years to add on claims to the northwest, where the same belt of rocks that hosts the Separation Rapids resource trends off to the northwest, and it's actually the same belt that hosts the Tanco mine in Manitoba. And there are other similar pegmatites in that area. Haven't done much exploration work on them yet, but definitely have potential for creating additional resources for us going forward. So as you may recall from my previous presentation, our vision is to create a process facility in a central location. And for that, Thunder Bay is the ideal location because it's got excellent transportation infrastructure being located on the north shore of Lake Superior. That means we can access international markets through the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence Seaway. There's good rail infrastructure, and is centrally located to all of northwestern Ontario. And I always like to remind people that lithium pegmatite resources are not uncommon at all throughout the Canadian Shield, and there are hundreds of them that offer potential new resource development opportunities throughout the north and northwestern Ontario. And that's why I'm excited about the opportunities for the Indigenous economy in northern Ontario. So establishing a midstream processing facility in Thunder Bay makes total sense in terms of recognizing that this is going to be a growth business, and Separation Rapids can create the initial feed for that facility. But by opening the door to other new producers that can create supply of other lithium mineral concentrates, and we can process them, whether it's spodumene or pedalite, and that will allow for growth over time to continue to increase the amount of battery materials we can produce to serve what is going to be definitely a continuing growth market. And everyone seems to like our model there too. That was what was recognized for a long time as the missing piece here, was the midstream processing capacity. And that was always the most expensive part, is building that plant, by far the most expensive part of the whole operation. And now that we have an investing partner in ASAR, we've got a clear path to being able to access the capital we need to get that built and get the whole ball rolling here. And we're getting lots of interest from both the federal and provincial governments in providing some additional support. So it's all coming together pretty nicely, and Thunder Bay is excited about having this as a new economy there to replace the forest products industry that's obviously been in decline for the last few years. It makes total sense to take advantage of these new critical mineral supply chains and create the processing capacity there for this growth industry going forward. And as I mentioned, this new partnership with ASAR was a very important step for us, and they remain very keen to work with us on this. And while there hasn't been a whole lot of news, we're moving together towards coming up with the game plan on how we'll get going on implementing the plan here. I've already identified a site in Thunder Bay that looks perfect for this, and we're going to probably go ahead with to acquire that soon, and then get going on the feasibility studies this summer so that we'll be able to finalize our models both for the site and at the refinery later this year, and hopefully get started for construction in 2023. And this is the model that we created in 2016, where I just PEA, where I just updated it with more current lithium hydroxide prices to show what sort of value that this resource now has at current lithium prices. And you can see that now has an NPV of over $1 billion. So really good looking project here now for sure, to make a lot of money for our shareholders. But we still want to try to serve this glass ceramic market too. This pedalite is still in very high demand for these high strength glass ceramic products. And you don't hear a whole lot about it, but it's an area where there's continues to be a lot of innovation on other variants on how you can use lithium in glass beneficially in various aerospace technologies, automotive technologies. I can see it eventually being used as part of the light weighting in electric vehicles for windshields. And the pedalite has always been the preferred way to introduce lithium into the batch formulation, because the alumina and silica are ingredients too, and it's such a very high purity mineral. So that door is open to us, and we want to try to be able to serve both of those markets going forward here. And so to get things rolling in the short term, it's a matter now of trying to start to produce some trial quantities of the pedalite product for some of the customers that have expressed interest. And for that, we are in the process now of acquiring a demonstration scale dense media separation processing plant, because we've already done a lot of test work with that and shown how we can produce a high purity pedalite concentrate using that process. It's relatively inexpensive, and that'll allow us to get this ball rolling here and producing some product samples from the 5,000 ton bulk sample we collected last year, but couldn't find a place to get it processed, to make the samples for the customers that have expressed interest. And that may allow us to get some sales initiated within the next couple of years. And I've had no shortage of interest in creating a new supply from end users out there that are now desperate for it because China basically controls all the petalite supply now too. So we'll get the ball rolling there, and then we'll, as I mentioned earlier, be working on our feasibility studies, finalize the plan both at the operation site and at the refinery in Thunder Bay, and start producing some trial quantities. Hopefully be able to get the operation going on the battery materials by 2026. So I wanted to mention some of our other projects, and we do have this other LCT pegmatite project called LilyPad. It's up in Northern Ontario, due north of Thunder Bay, actually, in a more remote location near a First Nation community called Yabamatang First Nations, Fort Hope. And it's a very interesting project, even though it's remote. Looks like we're going to finally build some infrastructure access for the Ring of Fire that we may be able to take advantage of as well going forward. And it's uniquely enriched in cesium. And it's another one of these rare elements that you don't hear a whole lot about, that is very short supply rate now and has enormous potential for a lot of new applications and is used in a lot of technologies now, atomic clocks and things like that, that cesium is the critical material. And because it's in such short supply rate now, the prices have gone up tremendously. And now you can get, for cesium hydroxide or cesium carbonate, $5,000 a kilo for it. So opportunities knocking for us to be able to take advantage of that. Maybe we could start at a very modest scale. And as I mentioned to a few people, it's so valuable now, we could probably just produce small quantities and fly it out. Don't even need road access to get some initial quantities to market. And we have one dike there that is very interesting in that, unlike most occurrences of cesium where it forms a small pod within a larger zone pegmatite, in this one, it's one of the main minerals throughout the whole dike. So it's potentially quite a significant resource. We've done some drilling on it. You know, there's at least 300,000 tons there, but last summer we did some more mapping and found it extends at least 200 meters further to the west, and lots more cesium there too. So pretty big potential for this resource to become an important new supply source for cesium in North America, and one of the few in the world. And I want to talk a little bit about our East Kemptville tin project too, in that this is a classic example of a closed mine site with very good value in the waste. Not just tin, but a whole lot of other goodies there too. It's located in southwestern Nova Scotia, not too far from the town of Yarmouth, with good infrastructure already there. And one thing that most people don't know in North America, because there's been very little talk and very little historical production of tin, is just how important it's become in many new technologies. And I like using this study that was commissioned by Rio Tinto at MIT that ranked various metals needed in new technologies, and the one that ranked the highest was tin. And it's now, the demand continues to grow, and it's now in short supply and trading at record high prices of over $30,000 a ton. So we got to try to take advantage of this resource at East Kemptville, because it was the only ever primary tin producer in North American history. And that's one of the reasons there's so little knowledge on tin here in North America, is that there just wasn't much production historically. But here is an opportunity now. And just a week before PDAC, there was a conference here in Toronto of the International Tin Association, where I did a presentation on East Kemptville, but also listened to a number of other presentations by members of the association that talked about all the new technologies that are starting to look at tin in ways it can be used beneficially in these technologies. And it's amazing how many new technologies are going to be relying on tin going forward. The main one that we now know of is how it's now used for solders on electronic circuit boards, as illustrated in this picture. But there's more and more potential applications in the electric vehicle technology too, including in battery technology. There's different variants on anodes that can use tin. Solar energy now relies on tin. 5G communications is starting to rely on tin. Tin selenide for heat harvesting, hydrogen production, carbon capture, and the list goes on and on. Tons of innovation happening in this space. So it's time we started to create a supply and encourage more of that innovation and start creating some of the downstream processing capacity and manufacturing opportunities for tin, since Nova Scotia has a resource. That's an opportunity to create all of that downstream value added. Briefly on the history, it was discovered in the 70s, developed in the 80s by Rio Algom, but unfortunately it was hit a cycle in the tin prices that it dropped not long. The price of tin dropped not long after they got it going, and they ended up closing it in 1992 because of the drop in tin prices, and it was no longer profitable. And it's been basically a closed mine site ever since. It was inherited by BHP, and they let the mineral tenure lapse to the Crown, and we were able to acquire it in 2005 under a vehicle called a special license. And it required us to get permission from the surface rights holder to get access to the property. And they have not been easy to work with on this. BHP are a classic example of a major mining company that's stuck in the past and can't see the future, only see these closed mine sites as risk and don't see any upside in trying to look at redeveloping them or extracting value from the waste. But we've been persisting on it. And we did have a period of about 5 years when we did get access, when there was a change in the leadership there, and did a number of studies and looking at how we could recover these different elements that are in the waste there, and came up with a model that we had hoped that we were going to be able to implement. But unfortunately, there was a change in the management at BHP in 2019. We had an agreement and they refused to sign it. Close with no cigar. But haven't given up, because the province of Nova Scotia still likes our model and want to see something happen here to take advantage of this, all the resources that are here. And this shows the surface plan here and all the resources on surface. Still a lot of ore in the ground there too, but there's almost 7 million tons of a stockpile that was mined for tin, but with the tin price dropping, ended up just getting stockpiled. And now it's basically high-grade ore sitting there, just needs some processing. So there's lots and lots of value in the to be recognized here, and not just for tin, but lots of other elements in here too, including indium, gallium, germanium, and lithium. One of the things that that's now being recognized in similar resources in Europe is how closed tin mines, in many cases, the host rocks for the tin veins, contained a lot of lithium. So these waste rocks now are an opportunity to recover lithium. And these resources always contain copper and zinc, and the zinc minerals always got a lot of indium in it. These are all rare elements now in increasing demand in new technologies. And we've designed a process, sadly in 2018, to recover the tin minerals cassiterite using sensor-based ore sorting. And we had a partner that was really keen to implement it with us. And it worked really well, actually, as a passive method to concentrate the tin and get good recoveries. But then they wouldn't let us do it. So what we're still trying to promote is how they can just develop this at a small scale initially start with those stockpiles, start processing those, and then while we're doing that, look at what else can be recovered from the waste and how they can be recovered efficiently by doing lots of analytical and process test work to see how we can most efficiently recover the other elements that are in the waste and in the tailings pile there. And I also want to just briefly mention on our Nechalacho rare earths project that we did a deal a few years ago to bring in an Australian partner to get the ball rolling for us there by starting with a small resource near surface. And they're doing a good job on that actually now. And they implemented sensor-based ore sorting as a way to concentrate the rare earth mineral bastnasite, and are now building a process facility in Saskatchewan to create the mixed rare earth concentrates from the mineral concentrates. And if they get the ball rolling, I think that ultimately we'll be able to come in behind them and finally get an opportunity to develop the original resource that we found there back in quite a few years ago. And I also like to point out that our resource is highly enriched in zirconium too, and that's another element now. While it's not as rare, it's still in high demand because it's expensive to process to turn into the derivative products. And it's now needed if we're going to make the transition to using more nuclear, small modular reactors for clean energy in small communities. You need zirconium metal. It's a critical ingredient in the technology for shielding against radiation leakage. So that's pretty well it. We can turn it over for some questions here now. This our management team just mentioned quickly. We've seen a bit of turnover lately with a few of our longtime management team members retiring, and one new board member, Chief Harvey Yesno, who joined us at the end of last year and has been very helpful in getting the message out to First Nations on the opportunities that critical minerals present for the Indigenous economy.
Great presentation, Don. Important stuff here. Lorenzo M. wants to know, do you have a plan on which potential customers you will seek to sell once you're producing? And if any are major, are there any thoughts on a partnership or JV with them now?
Yeah, we've had a lot of interest. Unfortunately, can't drop a whole lot of names because it's always confidential who you're talking to. But we've had a number of major companies express interest in the automotive sector here in North America and internationally. So we have them as potentially giving us firm offtake commitments for the product. Looks like it'll be like lithium hydroxide, and potentially providing some of the additional investing capital to support getting the operation started. So yeah, that's got very good interest there.
Great. Kendra S. says, you have about $3 million in the bank, is that correct? How far will that get you before you need to do another raise?
Well, that'll get us all the way to the finish line in terms of getting the deal done with SR, because they're going to be putting up all the next chunks of capital for the next steps on the lithium project development.
Leah Thompson wants to know if you can give some guidance as to how far away you are from production, and have you published any milestone timeline yet?
Well, I had that one slide that showed the timelines between now and 2026, and 2026 is basically when we think we'll be able to get the lithium battery materials refinery in operation and producing lithium hydroxide. But before that, we should be able to start producing some of the pedalite concentrates for direct sale to the many glass ceramic manufacturers that have expressed interest in the product.
Robert Miller wants to know, is there a clearly superior method of extracting and producing EV end-use lithium, like Aussie and Argentinian brines versus Canadian hard rock?
Well, they all offer some opportunities for doing them in very efficient ways that minimize the environmental impacts. And as I pointed out with pegmatites, while you're taking rock out of the ground, you're not creating any hazards to the environment because there's nothing toxic in the rock. And I always like to remind people, if lithium gets in the water, that's good for human health.
Wow. Cameron Ross wants to know, does Avalon now have access to the East Kemptville tailings? And if so, how long might it take to start producing tantalum?
Well, we have no access right now, but we're working on a solution there. And as I mentioned, the province is very supportive, so it's just a matter of them just stepping up and just telling BHP to please get out of the way.
Okay. Britt Morton wants you to talk about your land leases. How long do you have these properties locked up for?
We have basically long-term hold on them. Yep.
And Sarah Rivera wants to know, what will a net zero through hydropower energy production do to your margins?
Can only be beneficial.
Right.
Especially if we don't have to invest the capital to build the power line.
All right. William Andrews wants to know if you've secured a piece of land in Thunder Bay for the processing plant, and do you have the necessary technical team in place for this massive project to go forward? Last question, is there a date to when this project may get off the ground?
Yeah, well, we do have a site picked out there now, and now we're in the process of making an offer to purchase on it, so we can finalize the details on it and get started on it. Yep, but we found a site that we think is ideal, and there are several there in Thunder Bay. Actually, that was one of the reasons we were attracted to it. And we do have some new people joining our team, and quite a bit of interest actually from others on getting involved, because everybody now sees how this has got a bright future, and getting involved in this industry early on will allow people to get better informed on it and have other future opportunities in it down the road.
Great. Do you have a date for that?
A date for?
When the project may get off the ground?
Well, as I said, with 2026 is the date we think we'll be able to start producing the lithium hydroxide battery material product, but we'll have other byproducts like the petalite concentrates before then.
Great. Angie Rodriguez says, congratulations on your Thunder Bay partnership. Are there any others in the works?
Yeah, we've had other conversations. Yep. Again, it's all confidential. Can't disclose any names, but plenty of interest in what we're doing. And hopefully we'll find some interest to work with us on the East Kemptville tin project, because there's, like I said, no shortage of interest in finding new sources of supply of tin now, as it's in demand for so many new technologies.
I bet. Steve Samuels wants to know, given how advanced Avalon is, why is Avalon's stock valued at 5 to 10 times lower than other similar lithium startups, many of which have less than 25% of the opportunity that is currently available to Avalon? Is it undervalued? Something else?
Well, it's definitely undervalued. And the main reasons, I think, is we did all of the original exploration work over 20 years ago. So we haven't had the frequency of news flow from our lithium project, because it's so advanced now, that your typical early stage exploration company has in releasing drilling results all the time, right? And the second factor is, being a diversified player in this critical mineral space, we rebranded the company to Avalon Advanced Materials to recognize how we are diversified in these new clean technology materials. So that means we don't have the word lithium in the name of the company. And that means 99% of speculative investors won't know we're an advanced lithium company. So one of the reasons I like doing these types of virtual presentations is to try to better inform the investing public that we have an advanced project. And when you're this advanced, it just doesn't allow for the same news flow that early stage exploration does.
Great. That's why we like to have this for you. Jerry C. wants to know why you merged with Protex Mobility. What do they bring to the table?
I'm not sure what he's referring to.
Okay, we'll move on to another one. Chris Mitchell wants to know a little bit more about your team's background. Can you highlight any significant accomplishments in your team?
Well, we've got some new people on board there, but we've had lots of experience in the sector generally. And one of the main things we've had to do over the last couple of years is basically inform government on what it takes to get these critical mineral supply chains started. And our VP External Affairs, Zishan Syed, has previously worked in government, so he knows how to connect there, and he's done a really good job of informing people in federal and provincial governments on the opportunity here and what it's going to take to get these supply chains started.
Samantha Sullivan wants to know what majors are in your space. Are they working your projects, and how much are they producing?
There aren't any majors in this space.
All right.
Most of the major mining companies in Canada have never had any real interest in non-traditional commodities. The only exception is Rio Tinto. They've started looking at how they can recover elements like scandium from the tailings at their operation in Quebec. But most of the other major companies have not expressed any interest in getting involved in non-traditional commodities like lithium.
We have another question from Rick Gray. Can you talk about your new convertible funding? When do you expect funds to start coming in?
Well, the way that was structured is we got all the capital up front, and it gets converted over time or paid back. We have the option of paying it back too.
So a follow-up question was, do you expect to pay it back, or will the notes be converted?
We're hopeful that we'll be able to pay it back. And if we're successful in finally getting a valuation on the stock that better reflects the real value here, then it'll be much less dilutive than if we'd done a pure equity financing in the current market environment.
Well, Don, we are out of time. We do have more questions for you, so we'll send them to you so you can answer on your own. But congrats on the update, and please come back and let us know what else you're doing in this important field you're in. So thank you for your time and presentation today.
Okay, great to be here. Thank you.
All right, everyone. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back at 12:30 Eastern. We'll be right back.